What is going on, investors? Hopefully you guys are all doing well out there. Thanks for tuning in to another video. First thing I want to do is thank all of you that have subscribed to the channel over the last few years. I've grown my channel tremendously over the last few months. I think I only had 1,000 subscribers a few months ago, and now I'm up over 11,000. So I just want to thank everybody who has subscribed, who's liked, who's commented on a video. I just want to say how much I appreciate that. Now, let's jump into things here. I just posted a video a few days ago after Apple reported earnings, and one of the big announcements on that earnings call was they were going to do a 4-to-1 stock split, and I got a lot of questions related to that. The number one question I got is, should you buy Apple shares now or should you wait until the stock splits? And so that's an interesting question. We'll talk about that. The second question I got was, how are fractional shares counted when there is a stock split? So a lot of people have fractional shares of Apple because of dividends. And so when the company pays a dividend and you reinvest it, typically you're rewarded a fractional share unless you have just a bunch of shares where you're able to acquire full shares. So lots of people out there have fractional shares. You have a tenth of a share, a half a share, a quarter of a share. How is that counted in the stock split? We'll get to that as well. So first question that I got a lot of is, should you invest in Apple today or wait a few weeks until the stock splits? And my answer to that question has always been, it is 100% irrelevant on the stock split whether you buy Apple shares today or in a few weeks when the stock splits. And here's the reason why. Think about one Apple shares as one pie that you just pulled out of the oven. It smells great. It looks great. You've got one pie. You've got one Apple share. All Apple is doing is coming in there and cutting your pie into 4 pieces. You have the exact same amount of pie. It's going to taste exactly the same. The only difference is this pie is now divided into 4 pieces instead of one whole pie. So it is relatively irrelevant whether or not you buy shares now or you wait. The only difference is if you think Apple shares are going to appreciate now and into the future. And I would actually look past the August split date. If you think Apple shares are going to be higher next year, if you're thinking they're going to be higher 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, then of course, just like any other stock, it probably is worth buying shares now than waiting. Now, the only reason why the stock split might matter to you is if you have a small account. So if you have $1,000 account, and don't feel bad for that. When I started investing, I had like $20. So $1,000 would actually be a lot. But think about that. Apple shares are over $400 right now. If you were to buy one share of Apple right now, you would be committing over 40% of your portfolio to one stock. Now, I'm not here to tell you whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but most people would tell you to be diversified. And so if you do wait until August, maybe shares are, we'll say $100 or $125. Well, now in a $1,000 account, buying one share of $125 stock is not having you go super overweight one stock. So that's what I would have to say about buying shares now versus buying shares in the future when the stock splits. Now, the next question I got was really interesting. It had to relate to fractional shares of Apple. And I actually have a couple fractional shares of Apple because I have been reinvesting the dividends that they pay every quarter. Now, what I would say about this is I called Charles Schwab, I called E-Trade, I called Fidelity, and I couldn't call Robinhood, but I jumped on their support and found some information. And all of it was very consistent among all the brokers. Here's what I found out about the 4-to-1 split when you have fractional shares. Most brokers would not give me a definitive answer on the phone because it is somewhat up to Apple as well what happens to those fractional shares, but most gave me the same answer, and that is you are likely to get cash in lieu of your fractional shares versus them splitting those shares. So let's say you have a quarter of a share of Apple. A 4-to-1 split would mean you would now have 4 quarters or one entire share. What my understanding, what Charles Schwab told me, what E-Trade told me, what Fidelity told me over the phone was that what's likely to happen, this is not set in stone yet, but what is likely to happen is you are going to be cashed out of that fractional share instead of it being times 4 essentially. So that's something that you want to keep in mind as we move closer to the date when Apple splits its shares into 4. Now, some things you want to think about is if you are forced to sell your fractional shares, that also means you are forced to pay a capital gains tax on that sale. And so if you have a profit in that share, that's something you want to keep in mind. Although a fractional share on, say, a couple $100 is not going to be a huge tax burden, it's just something that you want to keep in mind, especially when you file your taxes next year. The other thing that you could possibly do is actually acquire a full share of the stock. So if you're on Robinhood or some of these other platforms that allow you to acquire fractional shares, acquire the amount that gets you to a full share of Apple, and then you're guaranteed to receive the 4-to-1 stock split on the whole number of shares that you own. Now, what I would encourage you and all of you to do as we get closer to the August date where Apple is going to execute the stock split is I would call your broker, either Charles Schwab, Fidelity, E-Trade. It didn't look like Robinhood had phone support, but I would contact your broker where you have your Apple shares and just double check to make sure that fractional shares are going to be counted as cash in lieu instead of being split. And so that's something that you want to take into account as we get closer to that date when Apple will split its shares. So hopefully this video helped you out a little bit. Hopefully you guys are doing well out there. And I just want to wish you all luck with your investments. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again soon.